Hare Krishna and good evening. Welcome to another class of Chaitanya Charitamrita. We are discussing and reading Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Lila, chapter 7, which is entitled The Lord in 5 Features, Panca Tattva. So before we start, I'm going to chant mantra for auspiciousness, which is actually referring to the personalities of Panca Tattva. We already had one lecture last time, so we stopped at the verse 10, and now we will continue. Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gora Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gora Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gora Bhakta Vrinda. So, we were explaining the Panca Tattva, and I guess in Chaitanya Charitamrita we are explaining a lot of philosophy, and because sometimes in spiritual life we need to gain knowledge about who the Lord is and who are His associates, what are His energies, and so on. So we're trying to figure out the transcendence with our intellect, which can be hard because transcendental things cannot be understood by intelligence, but only by revelation. But the revelation comes through mercy, and mercy comes when we are determined in reading scriptures like this. So let's continue with the theory of who the Lord is. And we will start from text 11. So the transcendental mellow or conjugal love of Krishna is so wonderful that Krishna himself accepts the form of a devotee to relish and taste it fully. So again, Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami is just repeating why Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared in the feature that he appeared. And again he confirms how Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna himself. And he wants to taste what it's like to be a devotee. And then Srila Prabhupada explains, although Krishna is the reservoir of all pleasure, he has a special intention to taste himself by accepting the form of a devotee. So that's quite amazing in a way. So God wants to taste himself, so that therefore, because he wants to taste his sweetness, and Radharani is the one who is tasting the sweetness of the Lord, so he wants to take her mood and become a devotee in the mood of Radharani, so he can taste it himself, because he wants to taste all the pleasures that exist in this world. Actually, in everything that exists. It is to be concluded that although Lord Chaitanya is present in the form of a devotee, he is Krishna himself. Therefore, Vaishnavas sing, Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Radha Krishna Nahe Anya. Radha and Krishna combined together are Shri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And as Shri Swarup Damodar Goswami has said, Radha and Krishna assumed oneness in the form of Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. There was a picture of Radha and Krishna, and they looked like they were embracing themselves, and touching, like their feet would touch the feet of another, and their hands would touch the hands of another, and they looked intermingled. And then Srila Prabhupada said that this picture actually represents the absolute truth. And this absolute truth, because when we worship Krishna, we worship Radharani as well, because he's not separated from her. And in worshipping Lord Chaitanya, we worship them both. So text 12. For this reason, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Supreme Teacher, accepts the form of a devotee and accepts Lord Nityananda as his elder brother. Shri Advaita Acharya is Lord Chaitanya's incarnation as a devotee. Therefore, these 3 tattvas, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Nityananda Prabhu, and Advaita Goshani, are the predominators or masters. So again, in detail now, Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami explains Panca Tattva. So we said that Panca Tattva consists of, in a way, 3 features, or actually 3 categories of features. One is Vishnu Tattva, and then he explains how Vishnu Tattva, which means this is the Supreme Personality of Godhead manifested in various ways. So this is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is Krishna himself, Nityananda Prabhu, who is a first expansion of Lord Krishna, which is Lord Balaram, and Advaita Goshani, which is an expansion of Lord Krishna, actually Mahavishnu. So these are considered the predominators or the masters. And the other categories are Jiva Tattva, which is the living entities, which are represented in Shiva's Thakur, and Shakti Tattva, Energy Tattva, which is represented in Gadadhar, who represents actually Srimati Radharani. Text 14. One of them is Mahaprabhu, so that's Lord Chaitanya, and the other two are Prabhus. These two Prabhus serve the lotus feet of Mahaprabhu. So even though they are in a category of the Supreme Lord, they also come as servants. The three predominators, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Nityananda Prabhu, and Advaita Prabhu, are worshipable by all living entities, and the fourth principle, Sri Gadadhar Prabhu, is to be understood as their worshipper. So again, this is explained, how they are all servants, and Gadadhar worships the three features, the three masters. There are innumerable pure devotees of the Lord, headed by Shiva's Thakur, who are known as unalloyed devotees. So he's the one who is representing the Jiva Tattva. Jiva means living entities, and Tattva means like the truth or the knowledge of. So he represents this feature. And in all these five features, when we talk about them together, then we talk about God. God cannot be separated from any of them, and all of them represent one aspect of God. The devotees headed by Gadadhar Pandit are to be considered incarnations of the internal potency of the Lord. They are confidential devotees engaged in the service of the Lord. And then it's very nice explanation by Sri Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur in his Anubhashya. There are specific symptoms by which the internal devotees and the unalloyed or pure devotees are to be known. All unalloyed devotees are Shakti Tattvas, or potencies of the Lord. Some of them are situated in conjugal love and others in parental affection, fraternity and servitude. Certainly all of them are devotees, but by making a comparative study, it is found that the devotees or potencies who are engaged in conjugal love are better situated than others. Thus devotees who are in relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead in conjugal love are considered to be the most confidential devotees of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Those who engage in the service of Lord Nityananda Prabhu and Lord Advaita Prabhu generally have a relationship of parental love, fraternity, servitude and neutrality. When such devotees develop great attachment for Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they too become situated within the intimate circle of devotees in conjugal love. This gradual development of devotional service is described by Sri Narottam Das Thakur as follows. So then, this is actually a song that is sang by Narottam Das Thakur, which contains the knowledge and the conclusion about these things. So he says he's praying in this mood because he wants to obtain this position. And he teaches us in this prayer like what we should feel and how we should pray to the Lord. And what is the lamentation of a living entity who is entangled in this material world. So he says, when will there be eruptions on my body as soon as I chant the name of Lord Chaitanya? And when will there be incessant torrents of tears as soon as I chant the holy names of Hare Krishna? When will Lord Nityananda be merciful towards me and free me from all desires for material enjoyment? When will my mind be completely freed from all contamination of desires for material pleasure? Only at that time will it be possible for me to understand Vrindavan. Only if I become attached to the instructions given by the 6 Goswamis, headed by Rupa Goswami and Raghunath Das Goswami, will it be possible for me to understand the conjugal love of Radha and Krishna. So this is how Narottam Das Thakur laments, and this is what he prays for, and this is what his desires are. So he teaches us like how to cultivate such desires and what should be the frame of the mind and the mood of the person who wants to establish such a relationship with the Lord. By attachment to devotional service of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, one immediately comes to the ecstatic position. When he develops his love for Nityananda Prabhu, he is freed from all attachment to material world, and at that time he becomes eligible to understand Lord's pastimes in Vrindavan. In that condition, when one develops his love for the 6 Goswamis, he can understand the conjugal love between Radha and Krishna. These are different stages of pure devotee's promotion to conjugal love in the service of Radha and Krishna in an intimate relationship with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This actually means that we have to become attached to the one who has knowledge about all these things and to the one who has developed the qualities of a person who is qualified to serve the Lord in this way, and who can reveal these things to us, like introduce us into the service. So therefore, that's why it is stated that a person should become attached to Lord Nityananda Prabhu and the 6 Goswamis, because they are the ones who can bring us closer to the Lord if we follow their instructions, and especially their example. Next verse. The internal devotees or potencies are all eternal associates in the pastimes of the Lord. Only with them does the Lord advent to propound the Sankirtan movement. Only with them does the Lord taste the mellow of conjugal love, and only with them does he distribute this love of God to people in general. And what this verse is teaching us is that associates of the Lord, whenever he incarnates in this world, are definitely not ordinary personalities. So they are internal devotees or potencies who are eternal associates. So whenever the Lord incarnates in this world, he comes with his associates. He never comes alone. And he's always, because he's so pure, he's always surrounded by pure. And by that, he also gives mercy to the world. Next verse. The characteristics of Krishna are understood to be a storehouse of transcendental love. Although that storehouse of love certainly came with Krishna when he was present, it was sealed. But when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came with his associates of the Panca Tattva, they broke the seal and plundered the storehouse to taste transcendental love of Krishna. The more they tasted it, the more their thirst for it grew. So basically, this is the explanation of who has the key to the storehouse of transcendental love, and that is Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his associates. So if they were actually the ones who wanted to show compassion upon the world, and that was the mood of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the mood of compassion, and that mood is the mood of Srimati Radharani. So he came to bring that to the world. So Srila Prabhupada explains in the purport how Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is called Mahavadanyaya because although he's Sri Krishna himself, he is even more favorably disposed to poor fallen souls than Lord Sri Krishna. When Lord Sri Krishna himself was personally present, he demanded that everyone surrender unto him and promised that he would then give one all protection. So that's what Lord Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita. Just surrender unto me and I will protect you from all the sinful reactions and everything else. But when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to this earth with his associates, he simply distributed transcendental love of God without discrimination. So he was like the most, it was described, and many devotees and acharyas describe how the only qualification of someone to receive mercy is to be fallen, and everyone is fallen in this age of Kali. So therefore everyone has a qualification to receive love of God. But we're so unfortunate that we are constantly disturbed and our intelligence is not very good. So it takes us a little bit more time than it would be in other ages. So even though it's so freely given, rarely people take. I mean, they take more and more, but if we compare it to the amount of people on this earth, it's still a small percentage. But anyway, in the Bhagavad Gita it's described that only few people who try to accomplish perfection will become perfect. And of all these perfect persons, a devotee of Krishna is very rare. So that's something that's like a rule in this material world. But still, even though that is so, the pure devotees are so compassionate that they still try, and then they distribute the Maha Mantra all over the world, and they follow the footsteps of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who shows his mercy by distributing this transcendental love. So Sri Rupa Goswami, as Srila Prabhupada explains, therefore could understand that Lord Chaitanya was none other than Sri Krishna himself, for no one but the Supreme Personality of God can distribute confidential love of the Supreme Person. So, yeah, if we want to know something intimate about a certain person, then that person has to reveal it to us. So the only person who is qualified to talk about the intimate pastimes of the Lord is the Lord himself. And we also should understand that, of course, there are pure devotees who have knowledge, but no one can know Krishna in full. And no one can know all the rasas and all the relationships in full, because every living entity is situated in their own rasa, so he might not have this taste or knowledge for others. That's one thing. And the other thing is we are so small, we cannot comprehend Krishna or Lord Chaitanya. So the best person to reveal the knowledge and to teach by example in these things is the Lord himself. And that's what he says, that he anyway, it is described how the Vedas, the scriptures, they are considered to, Veda means knowledge, so they are considered to be the highest knowledge given to everyone, and it also includes not only spiritual or transcendental knowledge, but it also includes material knowledge. Basically, it's a guidebook of how to survive in the material world and how to live in the material world. But it comes from God. It's described how Vedas are considered to be the breath of the Lord. So they are divine, and they can only be revealed by God. So next verse, Shri Panca Tattva themselves danced again and again, and thus made it easier to drink nectarian love of Godhead. They danced, cried, laughed, and chanted like madmen, and in this way they distributed love of Godhead. So basically they were immersing everyone else in the ecstasy that they were feeling, because it was contagious. So Srila Prabhupada explains that people generally cannot understand the actual meaning of chanting and dancing. Describing the Goswamis, Sri Srinivasacharya stated, Krishna Kirtana Gana Nartana Parao. Not only did Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his associates demonstrate this chanting and dancing, but the 6 Goswamis also followed in the next generation. The present Krishna consciousness movement follows the same principle, and therefore simply by chanting and dancing, we have received good responses all over the world. So basically that's what the practitioners of Bhakti Yoga mostly do. They chant and dance, because actually it is described in the scriptures how in the spiritual world every word is a song and every step is a dance. So in a way they are just following the inhabitants of the spiritual world, and they are teaching by example what it means to live in ecstasy and live in Vaikuntha, in the place where there is no anxiety. And Srila Prabhupada emphasized that it is to be understood, however, that this chanting and dancing does not belong to this material world. It comes from the spiritual world. And they are actually transcendental activities. For the more one engages in chanting and dancing, the more he can taste the nectar of transcendental love of Godhead. So this transcendental love of Godhead actually makes a devotee dance and chant in ecstasy. So in distributing love of Godhead, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his associates did not consider who was a fit candidate and who was not, nor where such distribution should or should not take place. They made no conditions. Wherever they got the opportunity, the members of the Panca Tattva distributed love of Godhead. So basically, they would perform some singing in the streets wherever they got their opportunity, and they would chant all the time. And they were like this, they were teaching by example the world of how to chant the Maha Mantra and how to perform spiritual activities and how to actually relish the ecstasy of spiritual life. All of the members of Panca Tattva plundered the storehouse of love of Godhead and ate and distributed its contents. There was no scarcity, for this wonderful storehouse is so complete that as the love is distributed, the supply increases hundreds of times. So that's the principle of unselfish love. Like, if you give something, it's like you are receiving 1,000 times more. And in that sense, you can even give more, give more, give more. And even on emotional level, in the feelings, it also multiplies. Like the happiness multiplies, the ecstasy multiplies, the love multiplies in a spiritual sense. It's like there's a competition, constant competition in the spiritual world of who will bring more pleasure to Krishna, and that Krishna will bring pleasure to other living entities, because actually that's the goal of Krishna. He wants to also give pleasure to others. The flood of love of God had swelled in all directions, and thus young men, old men, women, and children were immersed in that inundation. So basically it affected everyone, no matter what the position of the person was. The Krishna consciousness movement will inundate the entire world and drown everyone, whether one be a gentleman or a rogue, or even lame, invalid, or blind. So this kind of influence will actually touch upon everyone. Nobody can hide from it, or nobody can be unqualified for it. Everyone can be drowned in this ocean of love. When the 5 members of the Panca Tattva saw the entire world drowned in love of Godhead, and the seed of material enjoyment in the living entities completely destroyed, they all became exceedingly happy. So that's the purpose of this whole immersion into transcendence, that all the material desires disappear, or they become purified because people become immersed in a higher taste. The more the 5 members of the Panca Tattva cause the rains of love of Godhead to fall, the more the inundation increases and spreads all over the world. The Krishna consciousness movement is not stereotyped or stagnant. It will spread all over the world in spite of all objections by fools and rascals that European and American lectures cannot be accepted as brahmanas or sannyasis. Here it is indicated this process will spread and inundate the entire world with Krishna consciousness. So basically, Srila Prabhupada wanted to say how there was a desire of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who wanted that the chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, or the holy names of the Lord, that it be sang in every village and town in the world. And in order for that to happen, the movement had to spread. And throughout the history of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, we can see that it spread. First it spread throughout India, and then with Srila Prabhupada it came to the West. And now his disciples took over, and grand disciples, and now it's really spreading all over the world. Even though some conservative members of the society in India, they thought that the mlechas, which all the Westerners are considered, because they don't belong to any category of the Vedic society, that's one thing. And the other thing, they're considered very low because they came from family sweet meat, and they don't follow any Vedic principles, so therefore they are called mlechas. And for the traditional Varnashrama Dharma followers, such personalities could not be considered to be brahmanas or sannyasis, because they totally fall out of that category. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who was a spiritual master of Srila Prabhupada, he wanted to teach the Indian society that a Vaishnava is more than a Brahmana, because if a person takes the Maha Mantra, which is not different from Krishna, and which effect is such that it purifies the person, that purification causes the person having good qualities of a Brahmana. So automatically, by becoming a Vaishnava and by chanting the holy names of the Lord and by following the principles of the Vedas, such person becomes a Brahmana, and even more than a Brahmana. And therefore, such person can accept a sannyasa order of life. And anyway, in Bhakti Yoga, the sannyasi being a sannyasi is not only belonging to a social order, it's a way of life. And even though sometimes we belong to some other social order, or even if we are of a certain gender, if we live a life of unselfish dedication to God, and if we understand that everything belongs to God, that He is the proprietor of everything, and that He is the supreme controller of all the three worlds, in the material world and spiritual world, and that He is the benefactor and the well-wisher of all living entities. If we understand that, then internally we can be a sannyasi. Sannyasi is the one who does everything for Krishna. So that's actually, he serves the Lord with his words, mind and body, and anyone can do that internally. Next verse. The impersonalists, fruitive workers, false logicians, blasphemers, non-devotees, and lowest among the student community are very expert in avoiding the Krishna consciousness movement, and therefore the inundation of Krishna consciousness cannot touch them. So he's basically saying how there are some people who will never become attracted to the movement because of their mentality. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he saw that, but still he's now teaching us in an exemplary way, like how a devotee would behave, even though what we now read is so. So he's going to manifest the quality of a Vaishnava, and the quality of a Vaishnava is compassion. And we will see in which way Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu manifested this compassion in this chapter. So the next verse goes as follows. Seeing that the Mayavadis and others were fleeing, Lord Chaitanya thought, I wanted everyone to be immersed in this inundation of love of Godhead, but some of them have escaped. Therefore I shall devise a trick to drown them also. So this is the compassion of Vaishnava. He wants to drown everyone in the love of Godhead, even though some people, avoid spirituality in the sense of Bhakti Yoga. They don't want to acknowledge some things. They think they're not attractive. They want sense gratification and so on. They want to do their own business. Still, the Vaishnava compassion is such that even though a Vaishnava will maybe suffer some consequences, or maybe be, put in an awkward position, he will still try to influence people because he wants them to be happy. So Srila Prabhupada says, here is an important point. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted to invent a way to capture the Mayavadis and others who did not take interest in the Krishna consciousness movement. This is a symptom of an acharya. An acharya who comes for the service of the Lord cannot be expected to conform to a stereotype, for he must find the ways and means by which Krishna consciousness may be spread. So basically, be creative in helping people to understand their spiritual nature. Sometimes jealous persons criticize the Krishna consciousness movement because it engages equally both boys and girls in distributing love of Godhead. Not knowing that boys and girls in countries like Europe and America mix very freely, these fools and rascals criticize the boys and girls in Krishna consciousness for intermingling. So when Srila Prabhupada writes these comments, he's actually referring to the Indian society that is quite different from the Western society, and he tries to explain that we have to adjust to the external circumstances sometimes, just in order to bring benediction to others and blessings, and to allow them to improve themselves or to grow in their spiritual life. So in order to do that, you cannot change the social customs. So that's what he's saying and trying to explain here. Next verse. Thus the Lord accepted the sannyasa order of life after full consideration. So before he accepted the sannyasa, Lord Chaitanya was actually a family man. He was married, and he was a great Pandit, scholar, who was trying to defeat everyone who would oppose him. And he was very, very intelligent. And but he realized that nobody was taking him serious. He was very young also. And a lot of people thought that he was puffed up. And so he saw that a lot of other people are escaping his instructions or his teachings. So he wanted everyone to start respecting him. So because out of this respect, everyone will get a benefit. So in Indian society, the most respected personalities are sannyasis, because they are considered to be the teachers of the society. So therefore he took the order of sannyas so that others could take him seriously, and that he can capture the ones who had escaped from the influence of the Krishna consciousness movement. So Srila Prabhupada explains that there was actually no need for Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to accept sannyas, for he is God himself and therefore has nothing to do with the material bodily concept of life. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did not identify himself with any of the 8 varnas or ashramas, namely Brahmana. He was not considering himself to be a Brahmana, a Kshatriya, a Vaishya, a Shudra, a Brahmachari, a Grihastha, Vanaprastha, and a Sannyasa. He identified himself as the Supreme Spirit. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, or for that matter, any pure devotee, never identifies with these social and spiritual divisions of life, for a devotee is always transcendental to these different gradations of society. Nevertheless, Lord Chaitanya decided to accept sannyas on the grounds that when he became a sannyasi, everyone would show him respect and in that way be favored. Although there was actually no need for him to accept sannyas, he did so for the benefit of those who might think him an ordinary human being. The main purpose of his accepting sannyas was to deliver the Mayavadi sannyasis. This will be evident later in this chapter. So this is like whatever Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu does, he does it to show compassion. So even taking the sannyasa order, he took so that others can benefit spiritually from that. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu remained in householder life for 24 years, and on the verge of his 25th year, he accepted the sannyasa order. After accepting the sannyasa order, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu attracted the attention of all those who had evaded him, beginning with the logicians. Thus, the students, infidels, fruity workers, and critics all came to surrender unto the lotus feet of the Lord. So that was his strategy of how to attract the ones who have escaped his influence to again come to him and to offer him respect. So Lord Chaitanya excused them all, and they emerged into the ocean of devotional service, for no one can escape the unique loving network of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And then Srila Prabhupada explains how Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was an ideal acharya. An acharya is an ideal teacher who knows the purpose of the revealed scriptures, behaves exactly according to their injunction, and teaches his students to adopt these principles also. As an ideal acharya, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu devised ways to capture all kinds of atheists and materialists. Every acharya has a specific means of propagating his spiritual movement with the aim of bringing men to Krishna consciousness. Therefore, the method of one acharya may be different from that of another, but the ultimate goal is never neglected. Sri Rupa Goswami recommends an acharya should devise a means by which people may somehow or other come to Krishna consciousness. First, they should come become Krishna conscious, and all the prescribed rules and regulations may later gradually be introduced. So what Srila Prabhupada here is explaining is actually what he did. Because when he came to the West, especially to America, to Boston and New York, and when he presented this Krishna consciousness movement, first he wanted to make others Krishna conscious, which means that he wanted to introduce them to Krishna and to inspire them to chant. And then afterwards, he would introduce rules and regulations. So basically, first he was serving everyone. He was cooking personally, Srila Prabhupada by himself. He was cooking Sunday feasts, or maybe they were not Sunday feasts at that time, but feasts that were organized wherever he was and where he was giving lectures. So he was serving others. And then naturally, the students concluded that they might help the Swami. So they started to serve him. So that was, he never forced anyone. He was just teaching by example of how to behave. And they were so impressed by him and inspired by him that they wanted to follow his example. And that they were interested in topics of Krishna. And then little by little, they were hearing about Krishna. And then, by the mercy of Krishna, they found, for instance, deities of Jagannath. And Srila Prabhupada saw that as a sign, and therefore he, I think it was Shyamasundar Prabhu that he asked to carve the first Jagannath deities in the West. I think they were in San Francisco. So, and then he tried to teach the devotees there how to worship the deities. But the worship of the deities was very, very simple at that time. Basically, he would say that they should offer everything they have to Krishna and to the deities. So everyone was making their offerings. There was no pujari. Maybe someone was in charge for lighting an incense or some lamp. But they were offering food, they were offering their clothes, they were offering everything they had to the deities, because Srila Prabhupada wanted them to understand that everything can be offered to Krishna and that everything can be used for the service of Krishna. So this mentality, this Krishna consciousness, the consciousness he wanted to first develop in them, and then the rules and regulations. So that's why he's saying that every acharya has its own ways of how to present people Krishna consciousness. So this was the way Srila Prabhupada presented to them. And yeah, he would always teach by an example. He said that that even though he was a sannyasi who is actually he's never not obliged, but he never takes any activities in the society. His only duty is to preach and go from door to door to preach and beg and so on. But Srila Prabhupada, for instance, engaged in marrying his disciples, which is something that a sannyasi doesn't do. So sometimes he wanted to explain the acharya does things that are maybe not according to what he should do, but he does them in order to help people to progress spiritually. So in the same way, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did these things. So the next verse explains how Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared in order to deliver all the fallen souls. Therefore he devised many methods to liberate them from the clutches of Maya. All were converted into devotees of Lord Chaitanya, even the Mlechas and Yavanas. Only the impersonalist followers of Shankaracharya evaded him. In this verse it is clearly indicated that although Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu converted Muslims and other Mlechas into devotees, the impersonalist followers of Shankaracharya could not be converted. After accepting the renounced order of life, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu converted many Kamanishtas who were addicted to fruitive activities, many great logicians like Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, Ninadakshas, blasphemers like Prakashananda Saraswati, Pashandis, non-devotees like Jaga and Made. So we will hear about all of them because they will be mentioned in Chaitanya Charitamrita. So all of them were, in a way, educated into Krishna consciousness, and all of them gradually became devotees of the Lord, even the Muslims. But the worst offenders, the impersonalists, were extremely difficult to convert, for they very tactfully escaped the devices of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But in this chapter, it will be described how even they became influenced by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Next verse. So this is where the story begins. So how Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu actually converted the impersonalists into devotional service, devotional cult or Bhakti Yoga cult. So this is what we are going to focus on now. So while Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was passing through Varanasi on his way to Vrindavan, the Mayavadi sannyasi philosophers blasphemed against him in many ways. The blasphemers said, although a sannyasi, he does not take interest in the study of Vedanta, but instead always engages in chanting and dancing and sankirtan. So they were quite critical about him, because sannyasis at that time, they would just explore the scriptures and come to conclusions that were actually very much based on mental speculation, logic, and wrong understanding, and especially because they were impersonalists and the followers of Shankaracharya. They said, this Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is an illiterate sannyasi and therefore does not know his real function, because all the sannyasis were considered to be very elevated in knowledge, and with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he didn't express it in a way. He was not debating with anyone, or he was not seeing as exploring the scriptures. He was only seen as dancing and chanting. So therefore they considered him to be a sentimental personality, and therefore they had no respect for him. They actually didn't understand that even though Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was dancing and singing, there was the whole philosophy behind the dancing and singing. So it was quite superficial on their part, because they were only seeing the externals, but not going deeper into understanding why he's doing this. So, hearing all this blasphemy, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu merely smiled to himself, rejected all these accusations, and did not talk with the Mayavadis. So basically, he just ignored them. He didn't care what they think. Thus, neglecting the blasphemy of the Varanasi Mayavadis, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu proceeded to Mathura, and after visiting Mathura, he returned to meet the situation. So basically, he ignored them, went away, and then, on his way back, he decided he will do something about it. So this time, Lord Chaitanya stayed at the house of Chandrasekhara, although he was regarded as a Shudra or a Kayasta, for the Lord, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is completely independent. So when we are going to talk about titles like Shudra or Kayasta or Brahmana or Mlecha, these are all categories that are given in the Vedic society, and they all have a certain definition and refer to certain personalities. And sometimes in the spiritual circles, some people are not accepted, and therefore for a sannyasi to stay in a house of someone who is in a certain position in a society was not very well accepted. But then it is said that this was Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is the Lord himself, and he is completely independent and he can decide where he will stay. As a matter of principle, Lord Chaitanya regularly accepted his food at the house of Tapana Mishra. He never mixed with other sannyasis, nor did he accept invitations from them. So you see, like, the most elevated personalities in the society were considered to be sannyasis. We said they were like the teachers of the society, because they, along with the Brahmanas, they had the knowledge of the Vedic scriptures, and therefore they were very much respected. But still, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, even though he was the sannyasi, he decided to neglect them and to associate with a Shudra, who was socially considered to be not very elevated, and he definitely, according to the social customs, did not possess the knowledge as the sannyasis did. So he was teaching by example actually here, and he will show what example he was teaching. So when Sanatana Goswami came from Bengal, he met Lord Chaitanya at the house of Tapana Mishra, where Lord Chaitanya remained continuously for 2 months to teach him devotional service. So now there's another story, how Lord Chaitanya taught Sanatana Goswami in the house of Tapana Mishra. And this is something that will be elaborately explained further on in Chaitanya Charitamrita. So he was instructing Sanatana Goswami, both Chandrasekhara and Tapana Mishra, and while he was instructing Sanatana Goswami, both Chandrasekhara and Tapana Mishra became very unhappy. So basically the situation is that Sanatana Goswami came, and he came in the house of Tapana Mishra, and he was still associating with Chandrasekhara, and he was ignoring the sannyasis. But these two servants of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Tapana Mishra and Chandrasekhara, they were very unhappy because these sannyasis were speaking ill words to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So they requested something from the Lord. They said, "How long can we tolerate this blasphemy by your critics against your conduct? We should give up our lives rather than hear such blasphemy." The Mayavadi sannyasis are all criticizing your holiness. We cannot tolerate hearing such criticism, for this blasphemy breaks our hearts. So they were quite sad because of all of this that were happening. And while Tapana Mishra and Chandrasekhara were thus talking with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu only smiled slightly and remained silent. At that time, a Brahmana came there to meet the Lord. So we can see that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu exhibited an example of being detached from the external situation. So therefore, he was really not bothered what the sannyasis were talking about. So he just smiled, even though his servants were very much disturbed. And that's in a way proper, because we should always be disturbed if somebody blasphemes others, but actually we should not be disturbed if someone blasphemes ourselves, because the principle of the spiritual life is Trinadapi Sunichana Tararapi Sahishnana Amanina Nanadana Kitanya Sadahari. So if we want to chant the holy name of the Lord purely, we have to be more humbler than the blade of grass and more tolerant than the tree. So if we were to develop such a mood, we should always accept everything what happens to us as a mercy of the Lord and tolerate and be humble. But if something happens to others, especially devotees, then we should do something about it. That's the principle of the spiritual life. This, of course, doesn't mean that we are masochists or sadists. However, it's, I don't know which one is which, but then we allow that people treat us in a wrong way. There is always a way we can behave, but the principle is that we tolerate and we are humble. So this Brahmana came to the house, and he said, "My dear Lord, I have invited all the sannyasis of Benares to my home. My desire will be fulfilled if you also accept my invitation." So this was an opportunity for Lord Chaitanya to associate with these sannyasis. And then this Brahmana said, "My dear Lord, I know that you never mixed with other sannyasis, but please be merciful unto me and accept my invitation." Lord Chaitanya smiled and accepted the invitation of a Brahmana. He made this gesture to show his mercy to the Mayavadi sannyasis. So there were two requests: a humble request of a Brahmana to come, and that Lord Chaitanya comes and eats with other sannyasis, but also the request of the servants so that he says something. So basically they thought oh, now he will come to meet the sannyasis. Now, finally, he will say something to these blasphemers. But actually, what Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu will do is he will show compassion, and very wonderful compassion. And again, he's teaching what is a Vaishnava. So that's a great example. So the Brahmana, he knew that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu never went to anyone else's house. Yet due to inspiration from the Lord, he earnestly requested him to accept this invitation. The next day, when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went to the house of that Brahmana, he saw all the sannyasis of Benares sitting there. So he's entering the house, and in the house he sees all the sannyasis, and they're all sitting there on some chairs or a cushion or so on. And this is very nice what Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did, and it's very inspiring, so please listen attentively. So as soon as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu saw the sannyasis, he immediately offered obeisances, and then he went to wash his feet, because in houses at that time, if you would enter there, also in the temple, actually, according to the rules of entering into the temple, we should wash our hands and feet. And also, if we receive guests or anyone, we wash their feet and hands. So, and that's how we actually worship the deities. Also, we wash their feet and their hands. So it's a principle that is done in order to welcome someone to their house. So after washing his feet, he sat down by the place where he had done so. So all these sannyasis were sitting in other chairs or cushions, but Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he washed his feet and he decided to sit there where the feet were washed. By this, he indicated his humbleness. So after sitting on the ground, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu exhibited his mystic power by manifesting an effulgent as brilliant as the illumination of millions of suns. So first what he did, he was not puffed up. So when he entered the house, he offered the obeisances, and with all his humility, he sat on a dirty place in a way. But then he invoked his mystic power, and he attracted the impersonalists to him, because impersonalists, they are attracted to the impersonal feature of the Lord, which is Brahmajyoti. And Brahmajyoti is actually the effulgence of the Lord. So what did Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu do? He manifests the effulgence as brilliant as the illumination of millions of suns. So he did that in order to attract the impersonalists. When the sannyasis saw the brilliant illumination of the body of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, their minds were attracted, and they all immediately gave up their sitting places and stood in respect. So he got their attention. The leader of all the Mayavadi sannyasis present was named Prakashananda Saraswati, and after standing up, he addressed Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as follows with great respect. He said, please come here, Your Holiness. Why do you sit in that unclean place? What has caused your lamentation? The Lord replied, I belong to a lower order of sannyasis, therefore I do not deserve to sit with you. So this is how other people's hearts become soft if you're humble towards them. So this is the exhibition of humbleness by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He's the Lord himself, he's Krishna himself, but still he's being humbled he's being humble in front of the sannyasis who are impersonalists and who are actually definitely lower than him. But that's not the point. The point is the teaching of an acharya. So an acharya is the one who teaches by an example. And he manifested that example in this pastime. Prakashananda Saraswati, however, caught Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu personally by the hand and seated him with great respect in the midst of the assembly. So you can see that when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu started preaching, he convinced some living entities, people around him, to follow Krishna consciousness. But some people escaped, and he said the fruity workers, the logicians, the students, and so on. So therefore, because they didn't offer him any respect and they didn't take him seriously, he took the sannyasa order. And then all these persons, categories of persons that he named in these verses that we read by now, they subdued to him, they offered him respect because he was now a sannyasi in the renounced order of life, and such a person should be respected. And therefore they offered their respects to him, and they in a way surrendered to him because he was considered to be a teacher of the society. But the only people who evaded to surrender unto Lord Chaitanya as Lord Krishna or to Krishna consciousness were the impersonalists. So he was thinking how he can actually convince them to surrender unto him, or at least to show respect to him. And he did it here. So he was very humble. He sat on a place which is very dirty. He manifested the mystic power of his by manifesting effulgence like a Brahmajyoti. He attracted the impersonalists, and they saw that he was special, and therefore they offered respect to him. So in a way, they got benefit, because as soon as we offer respect to the Lord, it's a devotional service in a way. So that's how he gave them mercy or compassion. Prakashananda Saraswati then said, I understand that your name is Sri Krishna Chaitanya. You are a disciple of Sri Keshava Bharati, and therefore you are glorious. You belong to our Shankara Sampradaya and live in our village, Varanasi. Why then do you not associate with us? Why is it that you avoid even seeing us? So they don't understand, like, why is he not associating with them? Because he's the same as them. You are a sannyasi. Why then do you indulge in chanting and dancing, engaging in your Sankirtan movement in the company of fanatics? So they're expressing their doubts, like, what are you doing? We look at you, and you're only dancing, and you're only singing this mantra. You should be studying the scriptures like we're studying. You should be associating with us. Why aren't you doing this? Meditation and the study of Vedanta are the sole duties of a sannyasi. Why do you abandon those to dance with the fanatics? So still they don't understand. They just see the external things. They don't understand that actually behind the dancing and singing there is the whole philosophy of Krishna consciousness. And then he said to him, you look as brilliant as if you were a Narayan himself. Will you kindly explain the reason that you have adopted the behavior of a lower class people? Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu replied to Prakashananda Saraswati, my dear sir, kindly hear the reason. My spiritual master considered me a fool, and therefore he chastised me. So again we can see an example of how humble Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is. So he's not going to be puffed up and say, I know better. I actually know the religious principle for this age and you don't know anything. So he's not definitely approaching the sannyasis in this way, but very humbly. Like, my master considered me the greatest fool. So therefore, because he's thought that I cannot understand anything, he induced me in chanting of the Maha Mantra. He said, you are a fool, my spiritual master said. You are not qualified to study Vedanta philosophy, and therefore you must always chant the holy name of Krishna. This is the essence of all the mantras or Vedic hymns. So that's what he's trying to explain. He's preaching actually to Prakashananda Saraswati. Simply by chanting the holy name of Krishna, one can obtain freedom from material existence. Indeed, simply by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, one will be able to see the lotus feet of the Lord. So he's really giving them a benediction because he's chanting the holy names by preaching to them and also trying to tell them that the Lord is not impersonal, that the Lord is a person. And how is he telling them, like worshipping the lotus feet of the Lord? If the Lord is a person, then he has lotus feet. So if I'm mentioning lotus feet of the Lord, that means there is a worship of a person. So in this age of Kali, there is no religious principle other than the chanting of the holy name, which is the essence of all Vedic hymns. This is the purport of all the scriptures. So basically what he's saying, that what's the use, in a polite way, in a humble way, indicating that. He's saying like, what's the use of your studying the scriptures and the Vedanta if you don't get it? You will never come to the conclusion of the Vedanta, and that is that the essence of all these Vedic hymns, which are incorporated in the Vedanta, is that we should chant the holy name of the Lord. That is the highest religious principle that exists for this age of Kali. And he's actually doing it because his spiritual master told him to do so. So after describing the potency of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, my spiritual master taught me another verse, advising me to always keep it within my throat. So he's trying to tell them what is the highest principle of the Vedic scriptures, and he also giving them another instruction of how to be successful in chanting the Maha Mantra. For spiritual progress in this age of Kali, there is no alternative. There is no alternative. There is no alternative to the holy name. The holy name, the holy name of the Lord. So that's the famous verse. Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama eva kevalam, kalau nastyeva, nastyeva, nastyeva gatira yataha. So this is the verse that devotees quote all the time, especially while performing kirtan. There is no other way. There is no other way. There is no other way. The Vedic way is to say it 3 times. Then to chant the holy name of the Lord, the holy name of the Lord, and the holy name of the Lord. So if you say it 3 times, it really confirms everything, and it's like a firm truth that this is how it should be done. And then in the perpetual, Prabhupada gives various evidences in the other scriptures where it is actually confirmed what Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says. And if you're interested to know that, you can read the purport. It's the verse 776 of Adi Lila. In the purport, everything is more explained in the detail, but I will not go through that. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, since I received this order from my spiritual master, I always chant the holy name, but I thought that by chanting and chanting the holy name, I had been bewildered. So he's going to tell them what he actually experienced and what he realized in chanting the holy name. While chanting the holy name of the Lord in pure ecstasy, I lose myself, and thus I laugh, I cry, I dance, and I sing just like a madman, which is actually the perfection of life. This external symptoms of a person who is in ecstasy is described in the scriptures. So he's basically telling them that he's manifesting this while chanting the Maha Mantra. So collecting my patience, therefore, I began to consider that chanting the holy name of Krishna had covered all my spiritual knowledge. So he thought it was maybe not a good idea that he chants this mantra because this mantra makes him exhibit these symptoms. So I saw that I have become mad by chanting the holy name, and I immediately submitted this at the lotus feet of my spiritual master. So here he again indicated how he's humble. So even though he had these realizations and he experienced all these symptoms, still he approached his spiritual master to see if what he's experiencing is good or bad. So by this, he was also giving us example of how we should also conduct ourselves in the spiritual life. So in all the doubts that we have, in all the experiences that we don't understand what is the case here, we should always approach our spiritual master and ask him for instructions. And therefore Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said to his spiritual master, "My dear Lord, what kind of mantra have you given me? I have become mad simply by chanting this mantra." Chanting the holy name in ecstasy causes me to dance, laugh, and cry. When my spiritual master heard all this, he smiled and then began to speak. So basically what he's saying that it's not like I didn't want to study the Vedanta when I took the sannyasa order of life. I actually wanted to do that, but my spiritual master, because I'm a disciple, I have to respect my spiritual master. So my spiritual master told me, "Well, you're a fool, you should not learn Vedanta, you should chant." And then he started chanting because he was a submissive disciple and he followed the instructions of his spiritual master. And then he began to exhibit these symptoms which made him mad and caused him to dance and laugh. So he was actually answering the question of this Mayavadi sannyasis. They were all wondering, why is he chanting and dancing like a madman with these people of the lower orders of life? But then he was saying, well, I do that because my spiritual master gave me this mantra, and I'm just following his instructions. And that's why you see me chanting and dancing like a madman. So this is happening. And he approached then the spiritual master and asked him, so what's the deal with this? And now the spiritual master will begin to speak and explain to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu what's the case here. So the spiritual master, Keshava Bharati, he said to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, or actually Ishvara Puri, it is the nature of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra that anyone who chants it immediately develops his loving ecstasy for Krishna. So basically I gave you this mantra, and what you're exhibiting now is the ecstasy. And that's quite normal, so you should not worry. Religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation are known as the four goals of life. But before love of Godhead, the fifth and the highest goal, disappear as insignificant as straw in the street. So basically he's telling him, I'm giving you the highest principle of spiritual life. Everyone else thinks that economic development, religiosity, sense gratification, or liberation are some goals to achieve in life. But there's a fifth goal to achieve, and that is love towards the Lord. And this is what I gave to you. And this is the highest goal that anyone can achieve. So for a devotee who has actually developed bhava, which means emotions or sentiments towards the Lord, the pleasure derived from dharma, which is religiosity, artha, which is economic development, kama, sense gratification, and moksha, liberation, appears like a drop in the presence of the sea. So the person cannot be satisfied by this. The conclusion of all revealed scriptures is that one should awaken his dormant love of Godhead. You are greatly fortunate to have already done so. It is a characteristic of love of Godhead that by nature it induces transcendental symptoms in one's body and makes one more and more greedy to achieve the shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. When one actually develops love of Godhead, he naturally sometimes cries, sometimes laughs, sometimes chants, and sometimes runs here and there, just like a madman. So basically what he's saying to him, all that you are experiencing is quite normal. Desperation, trembling, standing on end of one's bodily hairs, tears, faltering voice, fading complexion, madness, melancholy, patience, pride, joy, and humility. These are various natural symptoms of ecstatic love of Godhead, which causes a devotee to dance and float in the ocean of transcendental bliss while chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. It is very good, my dear child, that you have attained the supreme goal of life by developing love of Godhead. Thus you have pleased me very much, and I am very much obliged to you. So he's telling them, I have pleased my spiritual master by acting in the way I'm acting, and that you are asking him. And then the spiritual master said, my dear child, continue dancing, chanting, and performing Sankirtan in the association of devotees. Furthermore, go out and preach the value of chanting Krishna Nam, for by this process you will be able to deliver all the fallen souls. Saying this, my spiritual master taught me a verse from Srimad Bhagavatam. It is the essence of all the Bhagavatam instructions. Therefore, he recited this verse again and again. When a person is actually advanced and takes pleasure in chanting the holy name of the Lord, who is very dear to him, he is agitated and loudly chants the holy name. He also laughs, cries, becomes agitated, and chants just like a madman, not caring for outsiders. So basically, he's also telling them, like, what my spiritual master said is confirmed in the scriptures. So therefore, I got an evidence from the scripture that what I'm doing is bona fide. And also, he tells them why he's not associating with them, because in a way they are outsiders. I firmly believe in these words of my spiritual master, and therefore I always chant the holy name of the Lord, alone and in the association of devotees. That holy name of Lord Krishna sometimes causes me to chant and dance, and therefore I chant and dance. Please do not think that I intentionally do it. I do it automatically. So it's not that I want to offend you, I'm not associating with you. I just can't help myself. Everything that you see that is manifesting, it's manifesting automatically just by chanting this holy name. compared to the ocean of transcendental bliss that one tastes by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, the pleasure derived from impersonal Brahman realization, Brahmananda, is like a shallow water in a canal. So therefore, he says to them, basically, what you want to achieve, or what you already achieved and you are experiencing, is actually not very high. My dear Lord, O Master of the Universe, since I have directly seen you, my transcendental bliss has taken the shape of a great ocean. Being situated in that ocean, I now realize all other so-called happiness is to be like the water contained in a hoofprint of a calf. So this is just an example of the scriptures where it is described in this way. After hearing Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, all the Mayavadi sannyasis were moved. Their minds changed, and thus they spoke with pleasing words. So for the first time, he got the opportunity to reach them. So he came into their place. He was humble. He was a pro, and he exhibited, of course, the mystic power to attract them. But then they offered respect. And when someone offers a respect to you, in a way, he also wants to hear you, and he or she opens her or his heart towards you. So therefore, you can then speak and influence the person. And that's what happened. So they were very much influenced by Lord Chaitanya, and their minds changed because of his influence, and they spoke with pleasing words. Dear Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, what you have said is all true. Only one who is favored by fortune attains love of Godhead. So they automatically agreed. There was no opposition towards Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Dear sir, there is no objection to your being a great devotee of Lord Krishna. Everyone is satisfied with this. But why do you avoid discussion on Vedanta Sutra? What is the fault in it? So we will see what is the fault in it next Wednesday. Now I will stop because it's already past 8. But I think I saw some comment that I have to. Okay. So the comment goes, or a question. Bhakti is love. And as I understand from that part of lecture, when you said that Prabhupada inspired devotees to offer everything to Krishna, love to Krishna is much more important than rules and regulations. Yes, that's true. And especially if we try to tell newcomers, it is not good to say no illicit sex, no smoking, alcohol, drugs. It is better to inspire them to offer everything to Krishna and then gradually introduce some rules and regulations. Well, Bhakti is love. Love can be considered in many ways. Sometimes people have a sentimental understanding of what love is. Love usually means unconditional, unselfish care for someone or a service. So, and the love towards Krishna is actually love in action. It manifests in actions. And those actions come from love and surrender. But in order to love someone, we have to get to know this person, right? In order to love anyone in this world, we have to know why we love him, who is that person, what is attractive to us towards that person, and so on. So in the same sense, we have to get to know Krishna in order to love him, especially at the beginning. So, and even then, when we get to know Krishna, then still the love is not developed, but it's developing, like step by step, because through various actions and various activities, we can purify ourselves and then get our hearts purified. Because this love, this bhakti, this prema towards Krishna is not something that should be gained. It's already in our hearts, but it's covered by the layers of conditioning and dirt of our imperfections. And all the rules and regulations that are prescribed by the Vedas, they are prescribed just for the one goal, and that the person develops love towards Krishna. But also, because you're at the beginning, you have the wrong conception of love. So therefore you need rules and regulations in order to purify yourselves. Especially to purify yourself from the conception that you are this body, and subtle or gross. And therefore that's why we follow the regulations, to discipline ourselves in a way. But these rules, no sex, no smoking, alcohol and drugs, you don't go and tell people like, oh, you should not do this or that. You explain to them. I mean, you're not hiding that there's this principle, because actually these 4 principles are the principles of human life. They're not even the principles of spiritual life. It is what makes us human, and it is what makes us gain human qualities. So if we say no illicit sex, we are actually confirming the principle of cleanliness, because cleanliness is important for spiritual life. If we say no smoking, we are confirming the principle of austerity. Because anyway in life, I mean, no smoking means no drugs, no alcohol and so on. Anyway in life we will always have restrictions. We can get ill by some disease, and then the doctor may prescribe restrictions on our body and so on. But these are voluntary restrictions which we voluntarily accept to develop some higher qualities. So for no illicit sex is cleanliness, for no smoking, drugs and alcohol is austerities, and then no gambling is for truthfulness, and I always forget one. No gambling, no eating is for ahimsa. No eating meat, fish and eggs is ahimsa principle, non-violence. So if you explain to persons why you're not doing these things, and if you explain to them that it's like that by following these principles you're trying actually to live the life of a human with a right and proper consciousness, then I don't see the reason why not tell them. Yeah, and also if you teach by example, if you don't do these things, and people are usually very much inspired by other people's examples, because they see that persons are satisfied, persons are happy, persons are calm. These are some things that these are qualities or states of person's mind which are very much valued in the society. The whole psychology and the whole new age thing is aimed to accomplish these things. So if you are like that, then people will ask you how come, and then you can explain to them why is this different, and inspire them to offer everything to Krishna doesn't mean that you will inspire them to offer, for instance, meat to Krishna, because Krishna will never accept meat. So basically there are certain things that cannot be offered to Krishna, and they are actually included in these 4 principles that we follow. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that I'm sex according to the regulative principles or the rules of the scriptures. So he is that, but no illicit sex. And then you explain what is illicit sex. Illicit sex. Anyway, and yeah, no smoking and drugs and intoxication and such is here, that we can have a clear mind for thinking for Krishna. We don't want to cause any pain to other living beings, therefore we don't eat meat, fish or eggs, and we don't gamble and speculate, because we want to be truthful and we want to accept what is given to us by our karma, and we don't want to accept more than we are destined to have. So yeah, sometimes we say we can offer everything to Krishna, but actually that's not true. We can't offer everything. So these are the restrictions. But when I said that Prabhupada encouraged everyone to offer everything, is like they were offering clothes, jeans, I don't know, whatever they had, and so on, but following these 4 principles. But you see that today people don't offer their jeans and t-shirts to Krishna because, yeah, I mean, some people do. They think it's like they should offer it to them and then wear it, and that then Krishna knows that it's for his service. Well, anyways, we can talk about these things. And you had one other question about the chanting, which I didn't answer on the messages. Like, yes, every person has their own way to concentrate on the holy name of the Lord, but the principle is that you should just hear the sound. All these rules that are written, for instance, in Sachinandana Swami's books about the posture, about the meditation and everything, it's great because it makes our mind prepared for the chanting. But ultimately, we should hear the sound and we should just be immersed in the sound. And that's the right meditation on the holy name. And if we hear and if we let the mantra pervade our mind, then we will actually see what the scriptures describe. So in that sense, hearing is the most important element of chanting the holy name of the Lord. Because by hearing, the mantra enters in our ears and goes into our hearts and purifies our hearts from all the anarthas. And it purifies the heart in the sense that Krishna can come there and sit there in our heart and be present with us. So that's all. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'll see you in a week. Hare Krishna.